Welcome to the Power of Partnership podcast. I'm Riane Eisler, President of the Center for Partnership Systems. This podcast brings you voices from the partnership movement. People using partnership practices to build a world that values caring, nature, and shared prosperity. The Power of Partnership podcast is hosted by Cherry Jacobs Pruitt, a health policy and partnership scholar. Today, Cherry interviews Scott Morris, a proud graduate of our very first Caring Economics Leadership Program cohort, who has since become, quote, a token Jedi, end of quote, a globally recognized expert in regenerative economic systems to create more caring and resilient communities across the world. And now on to today's podcast.
Well, welcome, Scott, to the Power of Partnership podcast. On behalf of Riane Eisler and the entire Center for Partnership Systems team, we want to thank you for joining our show and sharing your information today about the power that place-based regenerative economic systems have on helping communities across the world build prosperity and resilience. So before we start with my asking you to share a bit about your journey leading you to become known internationally as the Token Jedi, can you share a little bit with our audience about what are place-based regenerative economic systems and why is this such a critically important conversation for us to be having today?
Yeah, absolutely. So place-based regeneration is something that most people just call common sense, to be honest. We live in a very globalized and fragile economic system. And a lot of people are realizing that, trusting the legacy systems that have created a lot of these preconditions and globalized supply chains, et cetera, just can't be trusted with caring about us in times of need. So what got me on this kick in the first place was the great financial crisis in 2008. My family was hit pretty hard by that. We lost our family business. We lost our home. And this is just as I'm, graduating from college and going to grad school. And I had found myself looking at, the global financial system and global financial institutions and realizing that they were what I was taught on face value as a child, and that when emergencies hit, they left a lot to be desired as far as taking care of regular people's needs. And so I wanted to know, what are the systems that we can organize and work with to provide that safety and security for ourselves in those emergency conditions, especially. And so that got me into a field known as community currencies. It's funny to be doing this interview with you and the Center for Partnership Studies now, because I was at the very beginning of my trajectory when I did the Caring Economy Leadership Program course with Riane back in 2010. And so that was while I was organizing my very first community currency pilot. So we're like really bookending my career here in this space. So it was really about, okay, what are the real things that we need to take care of, right? People need to eat, people need to, have shelter, and, kids need to be educated. All of our basic needs are right there. And typically we're capable of providing for those things ourselves. But the system gets in the way, right? And especially in these emergency conditions in a financial crash, the way that it's working is not normal. and we can't rely on it to even meet those needs. And we can see this in real time, right? As of the time of this recording, we've just had Hurricane Helene go and rip a hole through the southeast of the country, right? That you can see from space in terms of all of the power outages and whatnot. Not to mention the other disasters going on around the country and around the world. And so it's really important to give consideration to what are our safety nets, right? For when things get really bad. And that's what kind of got me into place-based regeneration, right? That really just means working together at the community level to ensure that we're going to be able to take care of our own needs in times of emergency, but also, in times that we would normally consider like normal or fine, we can all feel the weight of capitalism pressing down on us. And wouldn't it be nice if we had real alternatives, right, that could help us meet our needs and go beyond that, even while that system continues to collapse, right? From when I first came into contact with Riane's work to now, it has gotten worlds worse than, we could have ever dreamt. Here we may sit very well on the precipice of World War III. Who knows? It's unfortunately interesting times, right? In a very literal sense. So that what it means in other terminology is like mutual aid, time banking, community currencies, all kinds of like economic support networks, like childcare networks, etc., that we tend to invent out of necessity in communities all around the world. And you can see these things already there. And so what I've found myself doing is just kind of cataloging what are the different kinds of these things, and then creating that in a more of a menu format for organizers on the ground, so that, when you realize, you kind of wake up out of the matrix, if you will, and like, oh, wow, yeah, like this system that we're relying on, like it is not meeting our needs whatsoever, and it leads us to even greater realms of neglect and destruction. We need to have backup systems, right, and other ways of coordinating our resources. I think that was one of the things I was missing from my early experience as an activist in this space, with just knowing what the options are, and knowing how to organize those things most effectively, and not to fall into the trap of, what I like to call silver bullet thinking. This is not a silver bullet situation. We need the whole silver arsenal. So what's that look like?
So I assume then what earned you the title of Token Jedi as an international expert. I love that, though. It's beautiful. And so I assume that's because you're helping bring models of success, models that are ways that we can create that safety net at the community level. So can you talk about what some of that work has been and what those models may be?
Yeah. And in fact, I'm just surfacing one that I've been holding on to for a few years now, that I'm calling the Value Flow Compass, that I'd be happy to talk a little bit about. But yeah, the term Token Jedi emerged in 2017. I actually had an opportunity to participate in something pretty historic, both for crypto and for all of global finance. Back in 2017, I was connected to Bancor. They had originally approached me with a marketplace app that supported community currencies. And that was the work that I was doing at the time in Ithaca, New York, where I had taken over for a local currency there that was quite famous. It's called the Ithaca Hours. It's known by people who look into this kind of stuff from all over the world. And so what they created was the crypto economic mechanism that became what we know as decentralized finance, or DeFi. And this was a genuine technological and financial innovation, because it created a new way for people to exchange assets besides having to go through exchanges. and really lowered the barrier to people creating new kinds of, financial tools that can power communities and connecting those in ways that just weren't possible before. While I was working in their office in Tel Aviv, they asked me for like, what would your job title be? And I'm just like, I'm your Jedi on call. Version of it. And eventually that became Token Jedi, just because tokens are the tools of the trade. And so it's a little playful. It's cool. It tells people about who I am in this journey, and the kind of things that I stand for. Generally try to be a force for good in the world.
So do you want to share about the value flow compass that you mentioned?
Yeah. So I've been sharing, this is a very early iteration here, but it's something that I'm willing to stand behind. It is something called the value flow compass. And it is basically a business model canvas for, humans who want to be organized more effectively. The business model canvas was something that I first encountered like 2012, and it just, provides a single page that has kind of all the questions that you need to consider and have decently good answers for in order to have a potentially viable business plan. Well, out here in kind of the new world, if you will, where we're much more interested in distributed, systems and having our own agency in organizations, and transparent accounting and governance of these systems, it made sense to have a new kind of mapping environment where we can surface like, what is this ecosystem? Like, where are all the places that I can touch it or interact with it? And when you're out there building these kinds of systems, it's very easy to like spin up all these different tools and profiles in different places of, we do this thing over there, and there's this bit over here, and we vote over here, and we've got 40 different chat groups, right? But like, how are you supposed to find stuff across all of that, much less have a decent system for managing it all? And when you're operating in something like a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, hypothetically speaking, the DAO should kind of exist outside of all of us, right? It's like this, facility that can operate independent of any one party or group of parties. I think that's still kind of aspirational, but that's kind of the idea of the thing anyway. And so the value flow compass is designed to surface those different touch points in terms of like, who are the collaborators that are making things happen? What are the offerings that they're co-producing together? That's the first quadrant. Then who are the audiences that we're producing things for? How are we getting our offerings to them? That's the second quadrant. And then what are we asking for in turn? What are the things that they're ready to give us? That could be non-monetary things as well, like membership applications and governance proposals. But clearly, if we're trying to have a financially viable operation, we want to be tracking what we're getting paid in and how we're getting paid. And then where do those things end up, right? Where are the like accounts or resource bases that are servicing this ecosystem? And then great, how do we manage those resources, right? Costs and surplus. So it's basically just a 4-quadrant approach with different kind of fields to surface these different elements. And then you can explore the interconnections between them and start to kind of see those support systems in context, right, for where they come to life in that ecosystem. And my hypothesis with this and what I've seen from early testing is that it's fundamentally like partnership oriented and more collaborative because it breaks down those silos of information that can feed domination dynamics. So like if I'm the executive and I'm the only one with the bird's eye view, right, I'm able to kind of leverage that information asymmetry over people in, Department X. But if everything is out on the table, right, and we're able to see more of, who's here, who has, what roles and what special permissions in the ecosystem, and like what contexts there are, what ways there are for me to contribute, and how, value is being generated. And I can see how we're getting value back and what's happening with that in a more transparent way. It becomes a lot more difficult for an extractive actor like a VC to just be, making off with, the majority of the proceeds while leaving the people who are doing the real work with some crumbs. So I hope that people will also find that using this tool will enable them to keep more of the wealth they generate for themselves, rather than allowing that to be extracted by various parties along the way.
Nice. Thank you. You are listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. We hope you are enjoying today's episode and you will consider joining our family of sponsors. Or you can help us attract sponsors by downloading, following, or subscribing to the series and liking and rating each episode you view on YouTube. We also would love to hear from you, including if you have a partnership story that you would like to share. Reach out to us at center@partnershipway.org. And now, back to today's episode. So can we talk a bit more about domination that shows up in these systems? So the hope is for people listening to this podcast to become more familiar with the terms regenerative systems, place-based, community currencies. What do we need to be looking out for when people are exploring those to ensure that we're really coming at it from a truly partnership-based focus that is really to sustain communities and really hone in on that safety net component that you've talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that a theme that was coming up in Bernard Lietaire's writings towards the end of his life. He, was a monetary systems thinker and designer. He was very prolific in this space of, thinking about financial systems design, and he, especially with regards to systemic sustainability and resilience. And he was writing more about the esoteric nature of, this is about energy and balance and mutualistic dynamics. And, there's been others that have acknowledged that even heading into the monetary space, right, monetizing something, financializing something, accounting is pretty masculine of a thing to do because it's very much about control. If not control, then at least visibility, which kind of implies the potential of control, et cetera. So the question first has to be, is this the right way to deal with this problem when we're faced with a given challenge? Is this the appropriate use of, a monetization or a financialization strategy? So before we even kind of jump into deeper systems design thing, that has to be contemplated and kind of validated. Then I can speak somewhat from personal experience based on my work in Iowa and then Ithaca, New York. You can design a good monetary system or a credit system or a regenerative economy in isolation, right? You could come up with the perfect model if you want to. When you think about it that hard, you can do it, right? Because the principles are there. But that is not what making something happen requires. Making something happen and getting a community to engage and really utilize these kinds of systems requires that you do this in partnership. And that means rather than going off in isolation and coming up with the perfect system, you have to work with everybody else that is involved to co-discover and co-design the system. And that can only happen over the span of a good amount of time, with a foundation of trust. And so that is one of the things that I try to emphasize, especially when I'm doing things like earlier in the year, we did an incubator, right? In Refi DAO, we have what are called local nodes. And that's basically just, an organizer on the ground in a community is trying to make regenerative cool stuff happen, specifically using, Web3 tools and, regenerative financial mechanisms, etc. But we've been providing support to those kinds of local organizers. And this is like one of the things I was really stressing with them is like, it's really about, one, knowing what you're after, two, knowing who is involved with that, and three, engaging them in a co-design process around what this system, what is it that's going on now and what do we need to shift about it? And this can very much turn into kind of a tech bro approach where it's about requirements gathering, but the soft side of it is still very much relational and partnership oriented.
What is Web3 space? What is that?
Web3 is like the blockchain. Web 1 was somebody will have a much better rendition of this, okay? But like Web 1 is we're just like connecting and like publishing web pages. Web 2 is we have social media, so it becomes interactive. Web 3 is now we have a financial layer there that we're able to build on and work with. So people use Web 3 as a synonym for blockchain quite frequently.
So I'm joining, I live in beautiful Lafayette, Colorado in the United States. And so if there was a node in my community, what would that be looking like for me?
Well, that's a great question. Basically, we have like a local node profile that people can come and fill out. But the reason this is so hard to answer is because it's non-deterministic, right? We can say generally you're going to be working with these kinds of things or on these kinds of things, but you're not going to be doing this specific thing. So I can offer up examples of different kinds of like local solidarity economic systems that you can engage with, like as something as simple as like free libraries, right? Like those little libraries that people set up like that. Sometimes that's what people set up and do. Mutual aid networks around the country, especially during COVID, set up, basically repurposed those as ways of sharing food. There were some places that went so far as to have, open refrigerators kind of deal. So there are libraries or catalogs of these different kinds of, isolated interventions. But what we put the node forward as is as a container for organizing many of those together so that they are, kind of mutually reinforcing and creating more of a culture of, local self-care and mutual aid.
Beautiful. So, Scott, I know we're talking about community currencies, place-based systems, but I feel like crypto and Bitcoin is a piece of this puzzle around financial insecurity with our systems. And so can you talk a bit about how those fit in, and especially your thoughts on the degree that those types of systems are coming from a domination perspective that may actually be undermining some of the same goals that you're and so many others are trying to address in your work?
Yeah. It's really fun to work with crypto and not actually be a tech bro or, a blockchain dude. As you might recall, my career in all this began in 2009, 2010. So as far as crypto is concerned, I've been here the whole time. And that makes me a pretty unique figure in that space. I mean, there's people who consider, being in crypto a long time to be 2 years. And I'm just like, but the important thing to understand about that is, again, like to monetize or to financialize something is a very masculine sort of command control function. So you have to be very mindful of the culture that is created and the social dynamics that complement that system, right? That system can only ever be there to assist us. We can't design that in a way where it comes to dominate us. And this is something that we have to worry about with technology writ large, especially digital technology and social networks. So I found myself, playing a role of just kind of rounding things out, of reminding people that technology is not going to save us. We're going to save us. Technology is there to help, and then just seeing like the possibilities for how to get started, and that looks like having a way of engaging meaningfully with the community to determine what are the highest needs, right? What are your greatest pain points? And what do we need to focus on, and in which order? So another one of the things that I was able to innovate along the way is a model that I call the Agile Impact Model, that basically takes an agile approach. Agile, I'm sorry, I'm going a little techie here for a second, but Agile is a software development management system, okay, where basically each problem is a ticket that gets put on a to-do list, and then somebody comes and moves that into doing, and then they do some stuff, and then it's in review, and okay, it's good, now it's done, right? Like, what if we used that kind of project management structure for making impact in our community? What would it look like if everybody had access to that at any given time? And what would it look like if we had a substantial portion of our budget for that place not being run through a very relatively easily corruptible system of representatives, and stopped putting as much emphasis on voting for representatives than we did for policy? And that in setting our kind of collective spending priorities based on like where our pain points are. So starting to kind of explore into that direction, especially when you do have a flexible kind of financial and technical environment where, a community can say, okay, like we have a childcare crisis, we need to have the childcare marketplace. And yeah, it would be helpful if we could pay one another in hours of time alongside cash if we wanted to, so you can have a monetarily pluralistic marketplace and network environment, right, where these systems stop being so isolated and obscure, and they start to, like I said, kind of like stack up and build a critical mass that together can, counterbalance the more predatory market domination-oriented economy.
Love that. So, Scott, what is next? So learnings, resources, tools that you would recommend that people can start digging into to be hopeful and really start being involved in this innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's more on the way. But in the immediate term, right, Shareable, right, shareable.net, put together a great book on sharing cities. And in that book is a wonderful example of the type of thing that we're building now digitally, right, which is a catalog of a bunch of these different interventions and programs, policies, etc. These days I'm playing a lot in something called the Open Civics Network. They're actually celebrating 1 year of, kind of launching and coming out there. It's a couple hundred, innovators and entrepreneurs and, other thought leaders that have come together already to produce some valuable research specifically for this purpose of, we recognize that we need to redesign so much of, civil society even, just, and if you want to know why, just take a quick look around. Clearly the legacy systems are not invested in our long-term success. And so that means that we need to have easier access to other options.
So for our listeners and viewers, I want to make sure you know that I will be putting all of the resources that Scott has referenced during today's interview in the show notes. I'll also be including a link to the Center for Partnership Systems so that you can dig deeper into Riane Eisler's cultural transformation theory, her domination partnership continuum, and of course, her 4 cornerstones that are at the foundations of every society, of childhood and family, gender, of course, economics, and narratives and stories. Scott, before we close, I wonder if you have any final words that you'd like to share with our audience.
Yeah, I would just thank everybody for listening. I'm glad that you joined us today. And, may the force be with you.
Nice. Scott, I want to thank you again for joining today's show. This has really been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Sherry. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. We're grateful to Rising Appalachia for the use of resilience as our Power of Partnership theme music. If you would like us to feature your partnership story, or if you would like to be a proud sponsor of the Power of Partnership podcast, please contact us at center@partnershipway.org. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will leave us a review on your favorite podcast channel. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released every other Tuesday. I'm Cherry Jacobs Pruitt. See you next time on the Power of Partnership podcast.
I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos. Uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to